Hi, Andrew here, to welcome you to this session of Larry Under Pressure. In this cook, Larry will be fixing a simple, delicious recipe of apple butter in the Instant Pot. It turns out exceptional every time and allows you to make it your own with spices and ingredients. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to the show. I'm Larry with Larry Under Pressure, and it's great to have you with us. This time of year, there's not much anything that's any better to eat or makes your house smell better than apple butter cooking in the kitchen. And apple butter's always been something that's been a painstaking process to fix, but with the Instant Pot that we'll be using for this cook, it's easy to fix and really, really good. Very simple. We're going to leave the peelings on and cook it that way. We're using the latest generation of the Instant Pot, but you can use any kind of pressure cooker, whether it's stovetop, any generation of the Instant Pot, the Ninja, the power pressure cooker, any way you want to fix it, as long as you can pressure cook it. So the first thing we're going to do is cut up our apples, and we need 5 pounds of apples. And I'm not using quite 5 pounds because I don't have that many, so we're going to use what we do have. And I'm going to cut them this way. Again, to make it real simple on us, we're just going to slice them right out of the core and put them in the pot and cook them from there after we add our ingredients. So I'm going to cut up the rest of these apples and put them in the Instant Pot, and then I'll be back and we'll get ready to start cooking these. As I mentioned earlier, this recipe calls for 5 pounds of apples. I've actually got about 4 pounds in there, but it's very forgiving, so it won't be a problem. The ingredients we're going to use are the same regardless of the number of apples, and we're going to use 1/2 cup of apple cider. If you don't have apple cider, you can use water, but the apple cider adds a better flavor to it. And before you start saying, well, we're going to get a burn notice, that's not true, because even though the Instant Pot always calls for at least a cup of water to keep from getting the burn notice, these apples cook down and they're very, very moist and cook down with a lot of moisture leaching out of them once they start cooking, and you won't get a burn notice. I promise you. I've tried this several times and it never happened. The next thing we're going to add is 1/3 cup of brown sugar. You can add regular light brown or dark brown sugar. There again, that's not going to make any difference. The next, we're going to add a full teaspoon of vanilla extract to add a good flavor to it. 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And the last ingredient is the secret ingredient, and that's a 1/2 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Now, instead of the pumpkin pie spice, you can use, if you don't have it, you can use some nutmeg and some additional cinnamon and maybe some ground cloves. But it's just a lot easier and just as good to use the pumpkin pie spice. And I find that the flavor that it adds is really, really nice. So let's give this a stir. Get it all mixed up and exposed to the spices that we've put in there, and we'll get it started. First of all, we're going to turn our Instant Pot to pressure cook mode. And on this new generation of pressure cook, you can't determine whether you're using low or high pressure. It defaults to high pressure, which is fine, because not many of us ever use the low pressure anyway. So it defaults to 20 minutes. We're going to move it to 90 minutes, which of course is an hour and a half. That's a long time, but that's what it takes, because remember, we have the peelings in there as well, so that's all got to cook down. And then when it's done cooking, we'll use the immersion blender, or you can use a regular blender if you want to mix this incredible concoction up. Put the lid on, make sure we're on the sealed position. An hour and 30 minutes on pressure cook. And we're going to press start. Now it's showing on. which it'll do until it reaches the temperature that it needs to for pressure cooking, and then it'll begin the countdown just as every one of these is always done. After about 10 minutes, it's now cut over to cook an hour and 30 minutes or 90 minutes. So we'll wait for it to cook. There is nothing to check in the meantime but to just do whatever else we want to do and let it cook. The cook cycle has ended now, and it shows that we've been 6 minutes into the cooling off stage, the natural release, because it shows we're on warm. So we're going to let it go until it's been 15 minutes, and then we're going to open up the Instant Pot and take a look, and you'll be right there with me. I got a little bit sidetracked, and it's been 18 minutes instead of 15, and that won't make a bit of difference. It doesn't really make any difference if it had been 15, 20, 30 minutes if you get sidetracked. But the little steam valve has already dropped, so there's no pressure to let off. And we'll go ahead and open it up and take a look. Let's take the lid off. Wow, don't those look great? Let me set the lid down and we'll stir them a little bit. The aroma coming out of this pot is just nothing but incredible. Yeah, they're very nicely cooked. Kind of soupy, but we're going to deal with that in a minute. Now, as I told you, we're going to use an immersion blender on these. You can use a regular blender or a mixer or whatever you have that you can get a good mix on these so that you break up the skin, which is already very soft, and the apples. But what you have to be careful of, I'm using an immersion blender right in the Instant Pot. As long as it's an Instant Pot and has stainless steel, you can use an immersion blender or a mixer or anything else that you want in it. If it's a Ninja or one of the other pots that uses a non-stick surface on the pot, you probably can't use an immersion blender because it's going to mess up the finish on your pot. So let's go ahead and put the blender in and mix these up. They look nicely mixed. Let's take a look at them with a spoon. Yes, it looks great. It looks almost like real fine applesauce, which is just what we wanted. However, it's soupy. It's much too soupy. So what we need to do is boil that down. And we're going to do that now. Let me give it one more little stir before we put the lid on. What I'm going to do, I have another Instant Pot device that's actually a slow cooker that uses a glass lid that fits perfectly. You don't have to use a glass lid. You can use the same lid that we pressure cooked with. But I like being able to look in and see, so I'm using this lid. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn the pot on slow cook, high, and I'm going to put it for 2 hours. It's probably not going to take that, but that's what we're going to set it at, and then we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll come back to you and let you take a look at it with me as we go. So we've got it set for 2 hours on slow cook, high, to try to boil off some of the liquid. We might have to end up tipping the lid a little bit, but one reason that I wanted to use this lid is because it has a little breathing hole that'll let some of the steam out without letting the heat out. So that's what I'm using. You could put it in a pot and put it on the stove. You could put it in a crock pot. There's any number of things you can do to get it boiled down to where it'll thicken up to the point that you like it. And remember, when you get it to a point that it's beginning to get thicker, it'll thicken up some bit more when it cools off. So don't get it to where it's going to be sticky. Let's let it sit for a while, and we'll check back on it in just a little while. It's been in the slow cooker on high now for about 2 hours, and I think it's about right. It's still a little watery in here, but I think once it cools, it'll be perfect. And it'll be just right to put on toast or whatever you'd like to do with it. I'm gonna dish some of it out into this little bowl where it can cool, and then we'll look and see what the consistency of it is then. It looks just about perfect. I think that's gonna be really right. Let me back the camera up a little bit so you can see more of the field of view. We'll let it cool, and then we'll come back and take a final test. Here it is cooled. Let's take a taste of it and see what it is. Yeah, the viscosity is perfect. It's just about where you'd want it. It's not completely cooled yet, but the flavor is amazing. Cooking it for as long as we did has made it real smooth, real good. You'd never know we left the peelings in there. Probably added to the flavor. And the spices that we used were just perfect. So I'd follow this recipe exactly. Once you've made this apple butter, there's several ways you can store it. You can either put it in glass jars and use a hot bath, following the instructions you find online to preserve it long term. You can refrigerate it in containers in your refrigerator for several weeks and it'll be just fine. Or you can put it in containers and freeze it for several months. So that's the ways that I've used to preserve it, and they all work very well. Leave your comments below if you have a better way, or if you have something else you'd like to add to what I've said. There'll be a copy of the recipe in the information below the video, so take a look there. Also, there'll be a link for the Instant Pot if you'd like to purchase one of these through Amazon. We get a slight commission on it, and it doesn't cost you any more. So it might be a good idea. They're really nice, and it's a great pot. The improvements are amazing over what they used to be, and the price is less. So it's hard to go wrong with that. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, we'd ask that you please subscribe to the video in the links below or in the little red box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Helps us a lot and gets our message out to more people and encourages us to do more videos for you. We appreciate you joining us, appreciate you looking in on the video. Hope you've enjoyed it and hope you have a great evening. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.
Thank you very much for joining us for the demonstration. If you're a returning subscriber, you know we love you and are always glad to have you with us. If you are not a subscriber, we would appreciate your supporting what we do here by subscribing. It costs you nothing and helps the channel. We hope to see you for our next presentation, and until then, enjoy cooking. This video has been a production of Larry Under Pressure.